Oh, konta. Let's fool around with some famous buildings. Today we're talking about the E-1027 house, one of the greatest masterpieces of modern architecture, and somehow, half the conversation surrounding it isn't about the architecture. It's about another architect who couldn't keep his paintbrush to himself. Perched on a cliff on the French Riviera, E-1027 was designed between 1926 and 1929 by the Irish architect and furniture designer Eileen Gray, together with the Romanian-born French architect Jean Badovici. The villa was built as their summer retreat and became Gray's first major architectural work. It is widely regarded as one of the buildings that blurred the line between architecture, furniture, interior design, and everyday life. The name itself is a code. E stands for Elaine. 10 represents the 10th letter of the alphabet, J for Jean. 2 stands for Badovici. This is the last time I'm saying this guy's last name, by the way. 7 stands for Gray. Basically, instead of calling the house our summer home, they gave it the world's first encrypted relationship status. To this day, it's impossible to determine exactly which part were designed by Gray and which by John. Although Gray is generally credited with the overall design, the interiors, and much of the furniture, while Jean provided architectural input. It was Gray who was primarily responsible for the holistic design of the structure, the custom-built furniture, and the surrounding decor. When researchers and biographers began unearthing the original project portfolios, they discovered that the vast majority of the technical architectural plans, interior sections, and detailed furniture renderings were drafted and labeled in Gray's distinctive handwriting and signature drawing style. The villa itself is remarkably compact while feeling incredibly open. It follows an L-shaped plan, has a flat roof, ribbon windows, floor-to-ceiling glazing, a spiral staircase leading to the guest room, and an extraordinary amount of built-in furniture. Every room was carefully planned around how people actually lived rather than how architecture looked in photographs, which surprisingly wasn't always the priority. Gray had already established herself as one of Europe's leading furniture designers before becoming an architect. Gray met Jean in 1921. He was 15 years younger, editor of an influential journal, and introduced her to the leading architects of the modern movement, including Le Corbusier. More importantly, he encouraged Gray to begin designing buildings herself. Together, they renovated several houses before embarking on what would become E-1027. Rather than designing a monument, Gray designed a machine for living. Except, unlike some other famous modernists, this machine actually looked comfortable. The house constantly transformed itself. Wardrobes unfold into partitions. Screens create privacy before disappearing again. The living room converted into a boudoir. The sofa became a bed. Furniture isn't placed inside the architecture. It is the architecture. Gray even designed a tubular steel side table specifically so her sister could eat breakfast in bed without getting crumbs in the sheets. The tabletop adjusts independently, catching the crumbs before they could fall onto the bedding. It's one of the most famous side tables ever designed entirely because somebody hated crumbs. The interior plays a constant game between privacy and openness. Large ribbon windows flood the house with lights, while carefully positioned partitions interrupt views and delay what the building reveals. Rather than exposing everything at once, Gray choreographed movement through the house. Despite the modernist appearance, E-1027 isn't cold. It's playful, intimate, and yes, it's very obviously designed as a house for two lovers. The architecture hides bedrooms, screens views, creates secluded corners, and carefully balances exposure with privacy. It's probably the least emotionally awkward modernist house ever built. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't last nearly as long as the architecture. Gray eventually grew tired of Jean's drinking and womanizing. The two separated shortly after completing the villa, and when Jean inherited the house in 1932, he continued using it with his wife. Gray left, the house stayed, and that's when another famous architect entered the story. Le Corbusier. If you've studied architecture, you've probably heard his name. Le Corbusier became a frequent guest at E-1027 through his friendship with Jean. Then, during visits in 1938 and 1939, Jean gave Le Corbusier permission to paint directly onto the villa's pristine white walls. Gray was never asked. Le Corbusier painted a series of large, colorful murals, sometimes while completely naked, which is certainly one way to leave your mark on architecture. Gray was furious. She considered the murals an outright act of vandalism vandalism. Le Corbusier's fascination with E-1027 didn't stop with the murals. Unable to buy the villa himself, he purchased the neighboring plot of land and built his tiny wooden retreat just above Gray's house. He spent many summers there, swimming every day in the Mediterranean and using the cabin for work and quiet contemplation. In 1965, he drowned while swimming in the waters directly below the villa. After his death, the coastline became protected as the Cap Modern site, and today E-1027 is recognized as the founding element of this important modern heritage landscape. Gray herself lived until 1976. She designed only 2 more houses for herself. Many of her large ambitions, including affordable housing, workers' leisure centers, and cultural buildings, were never realized, partly because of her own reserved personality and partly because of the sexism of the time. For decades, many people incorrectly credited E-1027 to Jeanne, or even to Le Corbusier. Thankfully, that has slowly been corrected. Near the end of her life, Gray finally began receiving recognition through exhibitions and articles celebrating her work. Unfortunately, the house wasn't having the same comeback. Its history after Gray is almost difficult to believe. In 1980, a doctor secretly removed much of Gray's original furniture from the villa under the cover of darkness and transported it to Zurich, where it was eventually sold at an auction. 3 days later, the villa's owner, Madame Schilbert, was found dead in her apartment in Zurich. Her physician, the very same doctor, inherited the villa. Things somehow became even stranger. The doctor reportedly hosted drug-fueled orgies inside of E-1027. Then in 1996, he was murdered in the villa's bedroom by 2 young men. Hey yo, what the fuck? At this point, the building's history started sounding less like architecture and more like a Netflix crime documentary. After his death, the villa rapidly fell into ruin. Squatters moved in, much of the remaining furniture disappeared or was destroyed. Years of neglect left one of modernism's greatest masterpieces in an alarming state of decay. Eventually, the French state and the municipality stepped in. The villa was purchased in 1999 and declared a French national cultural monument. Restoring it, however, turned out to be almost as controversial as its history. By 2013, around 600k euros had already been spent. In 2016, the Getty Foundation contributed another $200k to helping complete the restoration. Finally, after decades of work, E-1027 reopened to the public in July 2021. Gray's original furniture is long gone, but carefully produced replicas now occupy the villa once again. The restoration was also supported by the 2015 biographical film The Price of Desire, which helped renew public interest in Gray's life and work. Today, visits are limited to guided tours of no more than 12 people, probably for the best. Looking back, E-1027 is much more than a beautiful modernist villa. It's a story about authorship, about love, about recognition, about ego, about preservation, and about finally giving Eileen Gray the credit she deserved all along. Because despite everything that happened to this house, it was always her masterpiece. Anyway, I hope I gave you guys an appreciation for a very expensive breakup, and thank you for watching. Till next time.